On May 15th, 2025, just below that infamous Hillary Step, Sherpa Palshan Taming stared plumb into a situation that split his life into a before and after. Wind howled across that ridge, oxygen gauges blinking mighty low, and right there sat a man only breathing 'cause he hadn't quit yet. Subrata Ghosh of Bengal, plumb loco from altitude, frozen through his gloves, wouldn't budge an inch, no matter what was said, begged, shouted or reasoned. They were barely 300 vertical feet from Everest's crown, yet one impossible decision away from never returning to their lives, young'uns and families. Palshan begged, pulled, lifted, dragged, pleaded through chattering teeth, waiting in that deadly wind until both men hovered between hope and collapse. Eventually, that mountain forced the decision he dreaded most, and he turned away, walking down alone, leaving behind a man who flat out refused rescue. What came undone that day wasn't just one failed summit attempt, but the fracture of a tradition stretched across generations of Sherpa history. Because once you understand why Sherpas are backing away from Everest, you'll never see it as just a mountain again. To grasp that moment fully, you gotta start with an uncomfortable truth about who Sherpas actually are, not who tourists imagine them to be. Sherpas hail from high-up settlements along Nepal and northern India, surviving centuries where air thins, crops struggle, and winter just never leaves. Their heritage has been turned into legend, often painting them as mystical mountain guardians with superhuman lungs and fearless hearts. But the truth is plain and far more human. Sherpas bleed, tremble, ache, and grieve just like anyone, only they've learnt not to show it. Decades of guiding wealthy climbers taught them that fear expressed becomes fear multiplied, so they swallow it like medicine, quietly and alone. Just think about Ang Dorje Sherpa, whose courage still echoes inside high-altitude base camp tents like a whispered prayer for strength. In 1996, when a whiteout cyclone swallowed the upper slopes, most teams were pinned inside shredded tents, praying for the storm to pass. Ang Dorje clipped in, turned his headlamp toward hurricane winds, and climbed upward to reach trapped climbers he believed he could still save. He moved blind into walls of snow and drifting ice crystals, stumbling till wind slammed him down and forced retreat. When 8 lives were lost, including expedition leader Rob Hall, Ang Dorje stood alone in screaming wind, sobbing like someone who believed he'd failed his purpose. His role wasn't just guiding, he believed his existence was meant to keep others alive, and when they died, he carried the weight like personal guilt. The climbing world called Western guides heroes, showered them with magazine tributes and memorial speeches, and spoke their names like folklore. Meanwhile, Ang Dorje survived with frostburned skin so swollen he could barely hold a cup, recovering for weeks while his family waited in terror. And when he returned from near death, nobody asked if he was healed emotionally, if grief had scarred him, or if he feared the next season. Because Sherpas ain't treated as souls with limits. They're treated as human insurance policies paid to step between tourists and consequences. When panic erupts, when ropes fail, when climbers ignore warnings, it's the Sherpa who climbs back up, who shoulders the danger without bargaining. Even Sherpas who reach the summit of success still exist inside a system that assumes their life must be risked first and questioned last. Now take Ang Chering Sherpa, founder of Asian Trekking, decorated in foreign halls, beloved by elite climbers who request his presence at premium rates. He's guided for decades, helped shape infrastructure that turned Everest into what modern climbers imagine as an achievable trophy. Yet even someone at the height of Sherpa achievement still watches peers die to rescue those who should never have been on that mountain. Because no matter fame or recognition, the Sherpa is still expected to move first when someone else collapses, slips, panics, or refuses reality. And when a Sherpa falls to their death or freezes beneath shattered stars, rarely does the world speak their name beyond calling them local staff. When Western climbers bite the dust, newspapers print grand old tales, talking about their childhoods, passions, and the families they left behind. This ain't new, nor subtle. It's carved deep into modern Everest's very foundation. Older than dirt, like that summit photograph from 1953. Tenzing Norgay, arguably more seasoned than Edmund Hillary, was almost plumb erased from early tales, painted as secondary instead of his equal. His name was mumbled low, his hard work shrunk down, and that myth of Western heroism rose higher than the plain truth of their shared achievement. And that old myth, still kicking, has folks expecting Sherpas to fork over everything without ever asking if the cost makes a lick of sense. Which circles us back to Passion Tamang and the climber whose pure exhaustion turned into a stubborn refusal beneath that death zone sky. From the get-go, Tamang sensed Subarata carried a dangerous ambition, not respectful hunger, but a plain old conquering obsession. Any seasoned guide knows that look quicker than a rattlesnake strike. That wild glint of someone fixing to defeat the mountain, not just humbly endure it. A Sherpa can't just say no, because danger's flickering behind someone's excitement. That excitement is precisely what puts food on their table. Subarata insisted they start their summit push at 10 o'clock at night, shaking off all advice, and that single decision became the first domino to fall. Summit pushes begin past midnight for a reason. Weather ain't sticking around long, oxygen ain't infinite, and timing means life or death. Starting early meant climbing plumb blind, all by their lonesome. No trail updates, no other teams above to report wind or busted ladders. Still, cash talks louder than good sense on Everest, so Tamang led him into darkness that already smelled like trouble. Picture guiding someone in the death zone, where every breath rattles like an old jalopy and every minute just saps life from muscle fibers. Down at sea level, guiding means advice. But at 28,000 feet, it's survival triage, while your own brain starves for oxygen. When dawn broke, they were behind schedule, oxygen far and fast, but Subarata wouldn't hear tell of turning back. Summit fever had replaced good sense, and the wind kicking up across the ridge confirmed a truth Sherpas rarely say aloud. Some folks don't make the summit because circumstances fail. Others don't make it because their pride outruns their wisdom. Foreign climbers often think Sherpas can just strong-arm a decision, haul someone down, or call the shots, but that pipe dream crumbles when bodies stop obeying commands. A grown man can't be dragged kicking and screaming against his will at 28,000 feet. Not when every step feels like lifting an anchor made of bone and ice. So at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, after 13 hours of climbing, they hit the summit, where triumph glowed briefly before the cold numbers and altitude erased celebration. Subarata snapped photos, proof for his kinfolk he stood above the world, not knowing how mighty narrow the window of safety had already become. Tamang watched clouds rolling in, wind kicking up, oxygen gauges looking mighty low, and figured survival in minutes, not miles. They had at most 4 hours of oxygen, but needed 6 or more hours to shelter, meaning descent called for a speed neither man had left anymore. On Everest, the way down takes out more folks than the way up, because weariness wrecks judgment faster than altitude steals warmth. For the first hour heading down, Subarata stumbled but kept moving, and that fragile momentum was the last thing holding both men's futures together. Then they hit the Hillary Step, that final skinny wall of rock where the mountain demands full clarity, coordination, and pure grit. Right there, Subarata Plum sat down in the snow and mumbled 4 words that rewrote destiny. I can't see a blessed thing. Altitude blindness ain't some big old drama. Your sight just kind of fades out when your brain ain't getting enough air, leaving you with blurry edges and pure gut feeling. Tamang tried to rouse him, shake some clarity in, guide his hands to the rope, push his feet to move, but Subarata, well, he just wouldn't answer back. And then came the words that just sucked all the air right out of him. I ain't moving. There's a mind quit known by folks who study survival as give-up-itis, where your brain just decides dying is easier than trying. Subarata didn't just pass out, he picked being still. And that's the deadliest choice a body can make up there in the death zone. Tamang wasn't about to give him up to that no sir, dragging him by his harness and shoulders across that jagged ice, one brutal step after another. Just picture pulling another fella's whole weight when your own muscles are giving out, your lungs burning like busted rock, and frost creeping under your hide. Most folks can't even lift a man down at sea level. Tamang dragged one for 4 whole hours, slowly drowning in starved out oxygen. They only moved 300 feet. I'll tell you, 300 feet, that might as well have been 300 miles, for all the good it did. When Tamang finally dropped down beside him, his body just plain quitting out, he stared at a truth no old training book ever dares to speak. If he stuck around, they'd both kick the bucket. If he left, maybe one of them might just make it long enough to see the sun come up. Sherpas are raised with a duty deeper than gut feeling. A duty that outlasts fear, but survival. It just hollers louder than tradition when frost gets to your bones. So he stood up, legs shaking, vision flickering, and just walked away from a man who plain didn't want to live no more. His way down was just a blur of seeing things, reality slipping away, voices in the wind that weren't there, faces that disappeared when he blinked his eyes. His mind just kind of checked out, leaving only his muscle memory to lead the way. Left round that ice hump, right of that scarred rock, clip on here, head down there. Near dawn, he stumbled into Camp 4, barely making sense. Hands frozen stiff, talking all tangled up, his mind just unraveling like worn out cloth. Took him days before Tamang could truly explain, before folks understood the agonizing hour-by-hour choice that had busted him up inside. When search team finally got there, Subarata was still sitting right where he'd been, frozen solid in his refusal, like time had just turned to ice around him. The whole world jumped in with strong opinions, half calling Tamang a hero, the other half blaming him for leaving from their comfy, warm, leaving rooms. But judgment, it comes mighty cheap when you're breathing thick air, when your lungs ain't tearing like paper, when the world ain't falling away under icy cliffs. The truth that truly matters, it's brutal and don't give an inch. He should never have had to make that kind of choice, not ever. Because Everest these days ain't the one Sherpas inherited. It's an industry where danger's pawned off on fellas paid just a tiny sliver of what a screw-up costs them. Sherpas are flat out leaving, not just switching seasons or companies, they're pushing their boys towards safer tomorrows, towards schooling instead of death wages. The numbers